know you grew YouTube 293% whilst you were there over a year and a half, Meta 44%.
My philosophy on YouTube is like, I really think that a lot of people watching YouTube are doing something else with their hands. And so if you can just not annoy them in the first 5 seconds, oftentimes they'll just let that ad play.
Joanna Wallace is the VP of Creative Strategy at Birddogs, where she's built and led high-performing teams that drive brand growth across digital channels.
My philosophy on it is it's a combination of sources for your page. So some of it should be what has been working on Meta. Is this something that could translate to YouTube?
With a unique background in both agency and in-house teams, she's known for building creative machines from scratch, pioneering in-house strategy at scale, and consulting for brands like CreativeRx.
Would you make brand new assets specifically for YouTube, or would you just always have in mind you're going to do both?
When you have footage that is intended for other purposes, it's like we shot the footage, we shot the video, and then we're not worrying about that old raw footage. We're not using it again. With paid media, it's much more. So when you shoot, anything you shoot is going to have legs for a long time. So that's just like a shift in here's how the paid media team needs to shoot. It's so different and the priorities are different. Usually with your content stuff, it's much more focused on, and we're making.
Joanna, pleasure to have you on. You're a creative strategist, someone I admire and respect. We met for the first time a few weeks ago, actually, and I got a bit of a background on what you do. You're currently doing some consulting work with CreativeRx. And you basically pretty much single-handedly built the team at Hexclad from ground up. I remember you telling me when you first started, there was literally just not even a G Drive folder where all the assets were saved together, which is insane. And then you grew the team, and I know you grew YouTube 293% whilst you were there over a year and a half, and Meta 44%. I think the brand pretty much blew up, and I heard about it, a couple of years ago, and I think you were a major part of making that happen. So you were head of creative strategy at Hexclad, is that right? Or what was your job
Yeah,
title?
director of paid creative. I think what was interesting about Hexclad is I definitely jumped on after the initial, I'm not responsible for their initial success. But what was really cool was that at the point that I came in, the company had hit a point with their, scale where it was time they really wanted to bring everything in-house. So they had been relying on, awesome agencies doing great work. But this was like phase 2. And so I found it really exciting to usher in phase 2 of bringing everything in-house, creating a real machine internally. And so then for me, the satisfaction of what can that internal machine do? How much did that internal machine grow? Not so much I helped make Hexclad, it was just more, how do we go from, Hexclad level 1, level 2, level 3 to like the next level of what we can become. So that's where I take my pride.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, it takes a lot to build these kind of companies, and like all the small cogs added together end up making up the big machine. So, I wouldn't underestimate the part that you had to play there. But just tell me about like where you started from. So you jumped in, and you told me there was literally no G Drive, none of the assets were even organized, and like nobody knew what was going on.
I don't want to like shit talk them, so I just have to be careful about that. When I got there, they had all this branded footage and all this beautiful stuff that they were using on the website, and their recipes and their blogs and their, celebrity chefs telling you how to cook beef Wellington and stuff like that. But it was all, not intended for paid media. And so when you have footage that is intended for other purposes, it's like we shot the footage, we shot the video, and then we're not worrying about that old raw footage. We're not using it again. So it's very much a different method of production. And so, with paid media, it's much more modular. So when you shoot, anything you shoot is going to have legs for a long time. You're rarely doing like concept shoots. So that's just like a shift in how, when I came in, that I brought in kind of, here's how the paid media team needs to shoot. So we can combine and have shoots that are the content team first, and then we have the section that's for paid media. We have some shoots that are just for paid media, some shoots that are just for the content team, but really introducing this other flavor of production that's, pretty foreign to people who come from like entertainment and traditional production. It's so different, and the priorities are different because you're making art. Usually with your content stuff, it's much more focused on art, and we're not making art, we're making ads.
Yeah, and I think the predominant difference is, right, people are shooting like this normally, and then you have to encourage them to shoot like this all of a sudden, and the framing completely changes, right? So the shot list then has to be rethought about.
But as we moved on and as we grew, it really became, we started focusing a lot more on YouTube. And so because of that, the the way we started shooting was wide, was 16:9, and then you really just have to be careful about where is your action. So when we first started focusing on YouTube, we had a lot of this vertical footage from focusing on Meta for so long. But we were very lucky that we had all this content footage that was wide for the website. So we were able to get a good start with that. And there are tricks for turning, vertical footage into wide footage. You can do a split screen, you can do a border, you can fuck around and make it happen. Um, but then it was really interesting to shift to YouTube first because that has the most constraints in the sense of you need the most real estate. And so let's go backwards. Let's shoot for like the stuff that needs the most real estate, and then we'll keep the action in the center so that it works for everybody instead of trying to like retrofit it to YouTube.
Yeah. So just from my understanding, because we're kind of like heavily backgrounded in Meta, and I don't know much about about YouTube if I'm completely honest. So like, would you make brand new assets specifically for YouTube, or would you just always have in mind you're going to do both for every single shoot that you do?
So it definitely shifts. It really depends on your company and your focus. Um, I've worked with brands in the past when I was in, agency life for years and years, where we also did YouTube. So I have experience kind of, experimenting for totally different types of brands. I think I had a life insurance company that I was doing YouTube for. Dr. Squatch was doing YouTube for. Um, and I think it's really my philosophy on it is it's a combination of sources for your page. So some of it should be what has been working on Meta. Is this something that could translate to YouTube? Not everything on Meta that's working is going to translate. But when you find something that could translate, use best practices for YouTube. Do not just shove that thing on there. You can test a vertical video with like blurred sides. Sometimes that really works, so you can try that. But then you also, if you're going to do like an ad set to put on YouTube, I would do like the blurred sides one where you just take it from Meta, and then you really sit down and you say, how would I scale this to a different platform? It's just a different type of scaling. So, you can scale a concept that's working for the same persona, you can scale it to a different persona, you can scale it to a different product, or you can scale it to a different platform. And so with all of those things, as you scale or adapt something, you have to think about the best practices for that persona, for that platform. So that's, I think, what's really important to think about when you're bringing stuff over to YouTube. You have that skip now button. You have to keep people interested and not irritated in the first 5 seconds, or they're going to skip. And my philosophy on YouTube is like, I really think that a lot of people watching YouTube are doing something else with their hands. And so if you can just not annoy them in the first 5 seconds, oftentimes they'll just let that ad play. So like I'll be washing dishes and watching late night TV on YouTube, and if my hands are wet and soapy, screw it. As long as the ad isn't extra loud or really annoying, let's just let it play.
That's
So
interesting.
I think, don't
I
annoy.
never thought about what people are doing situationally when they're using YouTube, but it makes total sense because when you're on your phone on paid social, like if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you've got the choice to just swipe very quickly. So if you hate the
Mhm.
thing, you're just gonna get away from it as fast as possible. But that is interesting because when I'm watching YouTube, I'm either watching it on the TV or it's on the laptop far away from me, or like it's I've got a few seconds before I interact with it. So that's an interesting point there.
It's interesting. I was talking on a podcast with Sarah Levinger the other day, and it kind of freaking blew my mind. It was Nate that actually brought it up. And it's really interesting because I've found that there's this like split between attention spans. And I brought it up to the guys, like I didn't have the answer. And I was like, I don't understand. So we're simultaneously like losing our attention span where like, look, something shiny, quick cuts, fire, you know what I
Mm.
mean? For Meta, like, don't look away, please don't look away. But then on, even on Meta or TikTok and especially YouTube and podcast, people are willing to sit and listen to you babble for forever and like never get to the point. And so it's like this weird dichotomy of we have so much attention span, and also we like binge watch shows and like we can still watch movies, but then at the same time we have this issue of like just losing attention immediately. And they basically were like, listen, it's about the situation, it's about the context, it's about the platform. What is the person doing? What mindset are they in when they sit down and watch your content? Did they intentionally sit down and were mentally prepared to like watch a movie length thing? Or like settled in to binge watch something, or went on a long drive and have the podcast going, or are they doing something else and got interrupted? that's when they have no attention span. They choose
That's
their
interesting. Yeah, because we saw Meta, we run ads that are like 2.5 minutes long sometimes, and they do
they're
convert, and
crushing.
other times, yeah, they're doing really well. And then we've got stuff which is like 15, 20, 30 seconds, like the typical kind of UGC type stuff. And I always think like, how come stuff that's 2.5 minutes still works? Now, I think that Meta's algorithm, well, the algorithm just knows what time of day it needs to serve the longer form content to certain people. I guess like when
Maybe.
people are at home in the evenings, you know, they're just relaxed and they're sat down, slouched on the sofa. They're probably more likely to watch a 2.5 minute video versus when they're in the lift middle of the
Yeah.
day, just transitioning
Or in
between
the subway.
environments, right? Or on the
Do you
subway,
think that
exactly.
do you think Meta knows when people go to the bathroom? Because
Definitely,
that's maybe
absolutely.
when they have the 2-minute video.
Yeah, I that's a very interesting. I wonder if it's got a gyroscope in there which knows the movement in which like it's going, you're pulling your trousers
Oh
down.
my God. Oh my God.
I don't
What
think
does
so,
Meta
but
know about us? It's getting scary.
do you know what? It is extremely scary because if you think about how much data is accumulated on us, it's not just everything we've liked, it's everything that we've stopped and looked at and zoomed in on and swiped, everything, like everything from
Pause.
start to end. And also all of our website activity. So whatever the
Mhm.
pixel has tracked through your lifetime of being on Facebook or Instagram, then you've gone on a website, it knows all the different interactions that you did. So that is a ridiculous amount of data that it has on you. You know, it's the smartest algorithm in the world, which is why I always say don't try and fight it. Just run broad, let it do its thing, and that's always been what works for us.
But it's so interesting because, like, God, everybody is always like short video, short video, short video. And my philosophy on it, and I think the only thing that could prove me wrong is I mean, plenty of things, but uh it really depends on what the algorithm is favoring. So if the algorithm is like actively favoring shorter ads, fine, shorter ads. But I feel like it's opened up and isn't so isn't so what's it called? Not putting as much priority on shorter videos. But basically my philosophy has always been the video is as short as you feel like watching it.
Mm,
So
yep.
why wouldn't I make a longer video? Because, okay, in the first 15 to 25 seconds, I've given you the major reasons to purchase, right? I've emotionalized you. You feel. Okay, but what if you still have barriers, right? So that's when I have those secondary value props of like, by the way, free shipping and free returns and lifetime warranty and this and that. So for the people who were not interested, they left. For the people who were interested and they're already converted, they didn't need that extra stuff. And then there's people who really do need you to cross every T and dot every I. Let them keep watching, especially older
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah.
Why skip information?
I totally agree. Some of our top performing ads, they've done like multi seven figures in revenue. They've got a through play of like 1.5 or 2%, and it doesn't sound like a lot of numbers. But when you think about it, that's all you need to actually get good sales from an ad. You only need 1.5% of people to watch to the end, and those people who are watching to the end are likely to be your purchasers.
Mhm.
So I totally agree. I think one thing that does impact things is where your CTA comes in, because if you've got a short video, you've got the opportunity to show a CTA very quickly. What I mean is like a full screen CTA that takes over the page, right? So that hopefully then encourages people to take an action. I think when you've got a longer form video, the tendency is not to put a CTA in, mid video, because it's a drop off point. Then people who may have watched to the end might drop off, and the people who might take an action could take an action. So it's a gamble. Do you show the CTA? One, yeah, one thing we've tested that's been working for us actually is putting the CTA in the top bar. So rather than taking over the whole screen, maybe around about 30, 60 seconds in, once we've introduced the product, maybe we've got to the end of like a loop. Videos have loops, right? Where you open a loop and then you open a loop and then you open a loop and eventually you might close it, right? And that's what keeps people, you don't give the game away until you actually want to give the game away. At the point where we close the first loop, where we introduce the product and say what it is that solves all the pain points we've been talking about, we put a top bar in. It just dips in, saying, "Hey, CTA," at the top or the bottom. I
For
think we
those
probably
who are
tested both.
convinced already. Yeah. The
Exactly,
rest of you
exactly, and
continue on the train.
correct, and that's been working for us. It's really hard to say if that's the thing that's moved the needle, but we've definitely, all our top performing ads of that type, we've had it in there and it's been working.
Well, if you think about it, it all comes down to personas. So the same person who's watching the video all the way through is not the same person who's impulse converting after a few seconds.
Mm,
Or not even just impulse, but like I've seen 5 ads, now the 6th one is finally converting me. It's not an impulse, I've thought about it for 6 months. Whatever it is. But like there's different personas that are converting for different reasons and at different points in your video. And I think that you always want to have a dish for everybody at the dinner party,
mm,
even the vegans. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I'm always a fan of sort of like people take their time in their own time. the weirdest, okay, this is the analogy because I just got really into doing like ropes courses and like zip line because I live in Colorado and there's like a million of them. So when you're on a zip line, oftentimes it's like you can go two ways. You can go the short one and just, I'm done. This was fun. I'm scared. I'm gonna like poop my pants, get me off this thing. Or you have that point of you can choose to keep going and you can take the long zip line and you can like, really have a lot of fun. So I think it's like some people choose when they get off the ride. Maybe a train metaphor was simpler for this, but
Mm.
yeah, I just really think let people get off when they want to get off.
So there's a zip line, and then you go to a platform, and then what? You have the choice to jump off that platform and go to the next one. Is that how it works?
Yeah, but also I was doing this ropes course thing and you have all these platforms, you have like this athletic different way you have to get from each platform. And then you have this like fun little zip line. You basically at every few points you have a zip line that you can go and just give up and like go home and stop working
Okay.
out. And then oh okay, I'm still feeling good. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. There's this Japanese term, and I can't remember it, but like sometimes people use visualizations to do memory stuff, right? So I had to complete the visualization in my mind, which is why I asked you the question. So now I know, okay, when I'm thinking about ads and I'm thinking about the length of an ad, I'm going to be thinking about you on the zip line. There you go.
Yeah, looking very cool, like not like twisted backwards with like my legs in
Yeah.
the air, just like very cool and professional
With a helmet, safety first.
with my helmet.
So just going back a couple of steps then. So talk to me about building the team from the ground up. So you jumped in director of paid media, and then like, what was who was your first hire? Like, where did you start from? Like, how did you build the team up?
Yeah. So the first call I made was to my favorite editor, Ricky. And because we didn't have any dedicated paid media editors. And so I was like, I brought him in freelance and he speaks Joanna, which takes a little while for people to become fluent in. So he already spoke me and it was a new brand and new footage. And I was like, I just need my guy. And so we were able to churn stuff out pretty fast. But my first and then what I started doing is hiring people as freelancers. It takes a little while to get like full-time hire approval, and that's fine. There's, hoops and whatever. And so to fill that gap, because I can't just sit on my fingers and like wait for help, I was allowed to just hire freelancers. And so I brought on my like right-hand woman, my work wife from my last company, who had been conveniently laid off, which was wonderful for me. And brought her on and then brought her on full time after 6 months. And basically she's, like I said, my right-hand woman. And when you are a team that's small, you do not have time to have deep discussions over should we do this? Should we not do this? I wanted to bring somebody on who agrees with me. We're on the same page. I may not be always right, but we can get shit done if we're both
Mm.
on the same page. My second hire was another creative strategist, and she's another woman I worked with at my last company. And I hired her for a few reasons. The first one being that she challenges me. We don't think alike. We've worked together. We're very good at collaborating, but we come from very different places and we have very different opinions. And so oftentimes when she's doing an ad set, we'll have the Page version and then the Joe version. So it's like I call it like the Dennis Rodman version where she can just go nuts and do whatever she really in her gut thinks. And then we have the safe version, which is like Grandma Joe wants you to make it look more like an ad and have the order of the value props that we already have data behind. But we
Mm.
need that pushing the envelope and trying to think of new ways of thinking and presenting the product. But you also need to hedge your bets with the tried and true. We have data behind this. So it's like my philosophy is very much like if you're in Vegas, you're not going to put all your money on red. Like you're
Mm.
going to diversify your chips.
Yeah, I think for me, creative strategy is about leaving your ego at the door and just remembering
Yeah.
that you might not be right. Like in the end, you think you've got a gut feeling, but that's your gut feeling based on your life experience and everything you've ever interacted with, every ad you've interacted with, every person you've interacted, right? And then somebody else will have a whole different set of experiences, and I think that they will have a different perspective because of that. And my kind of thesis overall now is like just test both. Like if somebody's disagreeing with you, because of the nature of the work we do, we can test both without killing the budget, right? At least if you've got a decent. By the way, small accounts are really hard to scale. Like if you're spending like less than 100K a month, it's so hard. When you're
Picking
going
your
above 100K a month upwards, like you can test whatever you want almost.
Yeah. Picking your
Within reason.
fighters when you have no spend is really stressful because you're like, I only have a few shots on goal.
Totally. I feel like it takes way more skill to actually scale a brand
I
from
agree.
0 to 100K in monthly budget than it does from 100 upwards, just because like you said, you have to use your gut feeling and you just don't quite know, Um, you know,
There's different challenges though. So when you have a ton of spend, getting a good ROAS becomes efficiency becomes more difficult. So you
uh,
have that challenge of just like pouring so much spend. Can your ads handle that scale? So it's different issues, but for me, I have like so many ideas that to be at a company where I have a lot of spend is just like a kid in a candy store. Like it's delightful. I would rather have the challenge of dealing with so much spend than having to be so selective and kill your baby. And, because every move you make is just so vital.
yeah. Basically, each test is a larger percentage of your overall budget, so it's harder to justify. Whereas when you've got a few good winners carrying the account, you can afford to test a bit more. It gives you a lot more flexibility. But I want to go back to a phrase that you said. Your first employee talked to Joanna. What is talking Joanna? What does that mean?
So So I think one of the most important things in creative strategy is the relationship between the strategist and the editor. And like on my teams, I put a lot of emphasis on first of all, including editors in strategic conversations. I want to treat my editors like strategists as much as they are willing to be strategists. That doesn't mean that they need to go be super fluent in motion and like in there all the time or ads manager or whatever it is. Like, I don't want them spending a considerable amount of time of their day following data, but I do really want them to understand what's working so that when they're in the edit and they're choosing between clips, they're making smart decisions. It reduces the number of versions that you're doing. It means that strategists don't have to do time codes. They can just give vague directions in their brief for visuals, and the editor can make their own really educated decisions. It empowers editors. You get their ideas in the mix. I'm going a little bit off topic here, but I'm just going to say one last thing on that, which is that you need your creative strategy team to be diverse, right? Diverse in all sorts of ways: gender, ethnicity, age, interests, skill set, and you're not selling to just you. And the more you only have you in your department, the harder it's going to be able to hit all these different personas and create really well thought out content, because you need a discussion, you need debate, you need differing opinions. So anyway, back to your thing about editors. The editor strategist relationship is vital. And I really emphasize on my teams that there needs to be bonding between the two. You guys need to get to the point where I always say, Ricky, I want the thing with the stuff. And he's like, I got it. I know exactly what the thing with the stuff is. And that's the dream. So you can
Yeah.
speed up. My notes can be lazier. You understand when I just say period instead of please add
Mm,
a period after the word this, which sometimes when you're working with a new editor, you have to be so prescriptive.
mm.
And the faster you can just sort of half-ass your note and have it be
Yeah.
enough note for the editor to work off of, the better.
Yeah. Do you know, I totally get that. I remember sitting down with one of my editors. He's actually became a creative strategist and he's gone on to do his own thing now. And I remember I had like a really good working relationship with him. We're friends outside of work now as well. And I remember sitting down with him on an edit and being giving him feedback in person. And I kind of just gave him facial expressions like rather than like spelling it all out. And I think he totally got it very quickly, and we're able to go through the revisions in person. Luckily, we're next to each other, so it's actually way quicker.
Oh, how retro. I love
I
that.
know. I actually choose to have a physical office for this reason, right? So we can actually give feedback like in real time. And we have a remote team that does kind of like more iterative work. But the feedback went so quick, and we only had to do one round, and it took him like half an hour to go smash out the revisions. We launched it, and we got winning out, and it was amazing. I think that's one of the best experiences I've had in terms of connecting with a person, giving them feedback, and getting what you want. And I can 100% resonate with you. Basically, I
And
think
that's the
it's really
fun.
important.
That's the
Yeah.
heart. That's joy. Like, we're all creatives, and like when you're a creative, I've been a professional creative with health insurance since I was 21, and it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, because as a creative, you can either go the like really personal project of like the true art. I'm going to make my own movie, I'm going to work in TV, I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to make documentaries. And then when you go into advertising, it's not your creative anymore. Like it isn't you in a vacuum, whatever your heart desires. You are given the box of the brand and the product and the best practices and all those constraints. And so I think it's, a bit of a sacrifice, but you have to decide as a creative, do I want structure and stability and maybe not be so emotionally attached to my work? Or does it have to be my ultimate dream pie in the sky type of creative? And I chose practical. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. I like having a ton of little things, like tons and tons of ads that I'm not as emotionally attached to, because then
Nice.
it's like you're able to be excited for the wins and handle the losses because there's always something new. You're not doing a movie for 3 years and then it goes in the box office and it tanks. Um, so it's a difficult emotional dopamine roller coaster to be in this industry, but at least you have all these shots on goal that like so many other creatives have such a slower pace of creativity that like I don't know. I like this pace better.
Do you know what? I wrote down the words on my notepad here, emotional attachment, and I crossed it out. I'm like, I'm going to remember that. It's like, don't be emotionally attached to your creative. And I'm going to kind of instill that into the team. Makes sense.
Yeah, and I chose to leave a career where I was really emotionally attached to the content I was making. I was at Pop Sugar and I was making these short form documentaries on women breaking barriers. And ended up in Ghana for a 10-day shoot and like was really telling very upsetting stories. And women who've really gone through horrible things. And I became friends with them all and I got so emotionally invested and I overworked myself and burnt myself out and like made myself very sick. And I realized in that year of recollecting myself, I developed really bad migraines. I realized like I'm too emotional. I care too much in general, just who I am. And so I have to be very careful about the industry that I choose because I will make myself ill if I care too much. So I'm naturally going to care a lot when it's a creative piece of work that has my name on it. That's my baby. But I can't be helping the world. I have to be
Mm,
not hurting it, but I can't help the world with my job or it will crush me. And you have to kind of come to the realization of sort of like if you already have a stressful, fast-paced job, you can't also have that like crushing emotional weight of the importance of what you're doing.
mm,
Feels really good to just worry about like selling pants or selling
mhm.
dudes. And I'm like, this is good. I want people to have pants on. I do not enjoy seeing people on the subway without pants. This is great. I don't like people when they smell bad. This is great. I'll sell this. I'm not hurting you.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was trying to think of a good Machiavellian quote to match what you're saying about like letting the world move around you, but I couldn't quite think of one. But yeah, emotional attachment. I've crossed that out. That's definitely on my notepad. Talk to me about one thing actually, because you mentioned about making briefs, right? And you said time coding versus just having that open relationship with an editor where they just kind of like they just get you right. We do a bit of both. So we do stuff where we have a table and we literally put scene one, the clips to use, the copy to use, scene two, blah, blah, blah. Very time consuming for a briefer to do. You'd be lucky if like a briefer or creative strategist can do one of those in a day. If they're coming up with the script from scratch, it can even take a bit longer, sometimes a bit less, depends on, how they're working. When it comes to doing more open briefs, so we call them closed briefs and open briefs. When it comes to doing open briefs, creative strategists could smash out 3, 4 of those in a day easy. If they're just picking up a concept here, saying, hey, I roughly want it to look like this, but change these elements, go for it. Do you think that there's room for both, or do you think that you have a preference for one over the other? Do you think it depends on the dynamic you have with the editor? And final point on that one, it's a long question. Um, we often work with editors in different countries, and there's different cultural barriers working with different countries, right? There's a big tendency towards hiring in LATAM and Philippines, which we also do as well, by the way. And then there's also Eastern Europe, right, which I feel like is a bit different. I find Eastern Europe is closer in culture to Western advertising, similar to the US. So I think that they just kind of, it clicks a bit better. Whereas I find with Philippines, I don't know how to say, usually there's less free thinking because they don't understand what the end outcome should look like because the advertising style in their country is a bit different to how it is in the US and the UK. So I feel like they just haven't been conditioned to know what a good ad should look like. So you have to tell them what a good ad looks like. So you end up going through a lot of rounds of feedback. And generally, they're very good workers. They're very proactive. They get things done. They love doing a good job of it, and it's amazing. I love working with them. We have a number of them on the team. But I back to the original question is, I guess, closed briefs versus open briefs. Do you have a preference? Do you think it depends on the type of editor? Like, where are you at with that?
There's definitely a number of factors. So, kind of jumping back out to then go back in. Um, I consider there to be really two types of editors. There's like almost creative strategist editors, and then there are robot editors. And I think that I would never hire a robot editor. And I've worked with them before, and I can tell you for a fact that a bad editor who's not on the same page with people, um, or is super slow, um, is toxic for a team. It's really toxic because it's so frustrating to go back and forth and not be on the same page. And it wastes your time and it wastes your emotions, and nobody wants to get stuck with that person. It's a real problem. So when it comes to briefs, I think that it depends on the type of content, and it depends on if it's a new concept. And also it depends on the editor. So like, I love it when I can give a mess of crap UGC footage, a whole nasty folder, to an editor who I know is great at narrative. And I give them the gist of the opener. I'll give them probably like the order of bullet points because I know like the stack rank of my value props, or I know the intent because I did the shoot brief. And then I'll let them go at it. That's the greatest. When I have an editor like that, I hold them close. Then there's the in between of, I'm going to give you there's two types of in between. I'm going to give you the clip, but like, dude, you can figure out what second it is. Or I'm going to give you the gist, dishwasher opening, pouring into cup. You figure it out. Like, woman pouring into cup. Please go figure it out. And then it becomes also an issue of how new is your editor and who is going to take a longer time finding these clips, and who has the bandwidth right now. So sometimes it is the strategist who has to go in and be like, I'm going to do the heavy lifting of finding these clips simply because your editor is slammed. But I do think it's super important for the editor to be the one closest to the footage. So if your editor doesn't know the footage and it's taking them a long time to go through the footage, that's important. They have to spend that time going through the footage to get out the other side to know where the thing with the stuff is. And so it's very important for them to slog through because they have to be the closest. And the other thing about those briefs is, for example, when it's comedy, you have to be super specific. So unless you're working with an editor that has a real comedy background and real knack for the timing, that's when you have to be really prescriptive because beats and timing are vital. So again, it really depends on the type of ad. It depends on the type of editor. And that's why I want editors to be more strategists. And so I like to pull them in the meetings. I like to make sure they have at least every other week a little update, strategy light of what's working, with a brainstorm, and
Yeah, I think a creative strategist, one of their number one jobs is to just distill the information into a really easy to understand way for the wider team. And that's not just editors, which I totally agree with. I think it's content creators as well, telling them, hey, like, these are the main things that are selling the product, like, just focus on this, right? And that's where the creative strategist sits in the middle, and it really just top level communicator, they just literally distill everything down into very, very basic information. Totally agree with that. So, okay. And where's your kind of like go-to for hiring editors? What are your thoughts on hiring in different countries?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So, it's generally easier to work with an editor who's from your culture and from the culture that you are creating ads for. So like when we broke into Germany, we got a German strategist, but we also got a German editor. And like, yes, there was a little bit of a learning curve with him, but having that perspective was so worth it that get over it, take a little longer to get on the same page. When you're working with people from other countries, some of the best editors I've ever worked with have been from other random countries. However, there's a few factors. Number one is mastery of the English language. So what I find is that it takes a longer time to make videos in the beginning and to get on the same page. So you're going to have to invest way more time in connecting with this person and getting on the same page because their English may be phenomenal, but they may not know the right slang, or like def instead of definitely, or like, I don't exactly know. And so, kind of either having a conversation with them about sort of like, how can I best communicate with you? How short can I go? Because when you start working with somebody and you're worried about the translation issue, you end up spending a lot more time explaining yourself, using full sentences, making sure you don't have typos, blah, blah, blah. And that's fair. That's what you should do. But ultimately, that is more time consuming. And
Yeah, I feel like when people speak your native language and you're just from the same kind of like environment, you can use analogies and figures of speech and cultural references to. They're just like so quick to explain things. When you're explaining something to someone who's maybe got perfect English, but they're from a different country, you have to literally spell it all out, and it does take so much more time to give that
yeah,
feedback.
you can't use metaphors. I can't say like sweep it under the rug. I don't know if that translates.
Yeah,
And you might literally think I'm talking about cleaning. But the thing that I also know that I really so like I've had so much amazing success with Latin American editors. And one of the reasons I think is because we're in similar time zones. And I think that's something that people really disregard when everyone's very excited about the Philippines and there's a huge amount of talent in the Philippines. Every person who is working the night shift in the Philippines is at a disadvantage. Video editing is a very detail oriented job. You're not a security guard just trying to stay awake all night. You know what I mean? Like you have to be on your game. And we are humans with a circadian rhythm. Like you are fighting against your body and your brain's natural instinct to not be smart in the night and to not be at your best. And so not only are you dealing with a language and cultural barrier, but now you're dealing with the fact that this person is disadvantaged in their biological ability to do the job. And I think that that's where a lot of the issues also stem from of just and there's nothing you can do about that,
mm,
So
that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I personally think a hybrid team is good. So where you've got
I agree.
some people who are, let's just say, culturally similar to your audience, right? You want a team of those who are like, as you mentioned, your creative strategist type editors. And then I think when it comes to doing, I mean, I've seen one team set up where all the revisions are handled by people in the Philippines. So the first round is done by I don't know, Latin American or an American editor. And then once it's done and the client gives feedback, it comes back, and then all the revisions are handled by the Philippines. So that means any copy changes, any, hey, I don't like this, I do like this, and they use a file sync software which actually syncs the files, so it's very seamlessly, including the bin,
What is
by
the
the way.
software? Give me the software.
I'll send it to you afterwards. I've got it written down somewhere. Resilio. There's similar ones like that. Resilio. There's similar ones like that. It's
Sponsored
not cheap.
by no.
Sponsored by, affiliate link in the bio. Not really. We don't actually use it ourselves, but I know that for when you get a larger team and you're looking to split edit work between multiple different teams in that way, yeah, you're going to need a file sync software because you need the bin to sync, not just the Premiere profile. You need the whole bin to go, and otherwise it just becomes a headache to go and resync the files and all that.
And you might not want to create a whole server, so it's a
exactly.
shortcut.
It's a shortcut, basically. I think they host the servers for you, and then you just use this service, and it's as if you've got like a drive on your. Everyone's got a drive on their computer, and it's all synced up.
I love this. I'm stealing this. Phenomenal.
Steal it, take a raid, do what you want with it. But yeah, so I know that like a lot of some good teams that I know who are really good level operators have the heavy iterative work and revisions done by the Philippines, and it makes total sense. And then to have more of the open creative strategy type editing done by people who are culturally similar. For me personally, I think Eastern Europe is really solid. I think like there's a good amount of talent in there, which is very. The way I look at it is like this, right? What brands do they aspire to? They aspire to the same brands like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, all this stuff. So the advertising is kind of similar as well because they're looking at the same brands. Whereas if you go to the Philippines, I'm sure there's a cohort of people who do like Louis Vuitton and all that stuff, right? But the general mass public is not looking at the same brands, and the style of advertising is completely different. I don't know if you've ever been to like North Africa or like just anywhere in the Far East, right? The advertising is different. It's very like bright, bold, different captions. It's very literal. They literally spell things out. Loads of crowded text. Yeah, minimalism doesn't exist. It's like, hey, let's pack all the value props as much as we can on the thing. And they use literal descriptions of best shop, right? Like they'll call things best shop, for example.
To be fair, we do that too. Like good sandwich shop.
Yeah, we do, but it tends to be the discount end of the market. It doesn't tend to be like mid-market and above.
That's a good point.
So then by default, then they're fine tuned in that kind of way. And I'm sure if they were doing edits for their country, they would absolutely smash. But then that's like where translating it across, there's that gap in culture, I think, which makes a big difference.
And that's
Um,
the thing that you don't it's not oh god. So it's like I agree with your whole, like, scaling thing, and then at the same time, I'm like, I don't or, like, the revisions, I don't want to treat people like they're not capable
mm,
of doing a video from start to finish because they are. It's just a longer like, it's just that cultural difference. So it's very tricky of, like,
yeah.
I know that my foreign editors are fully capable of the same way that my American ones
Mm,
are. We're all equal in that way. And then but then it, like, makes me feel bad if I'm like, I'm giving you this, like, assistant editor work when you're above this. So how do you
yeah,
manage
I think it depends. I mean, I'm talking about Philippines specifically here now. I feel like the culture is one of servitude. They actually enjoy the fact of like doing a good job for their employer and just getting the work done. Um, and I feel like they can do that repetitive admin type work and be happy with it. I've seen people be like very fulfilled doing that type of work in the Philippines. We're just not used to it because it's not our mindset. We're always taught we should do something creative and different. Whereas I feel like that's kind of baked in. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm talking in general terms here from my experience. There are people within our team who are culturally, I don't know how you want to put it. They've got more cultural experience with the West, and so they're able to pick up edits. And I have got Filipinos who can do the creative strategy type edits end to end, and they produce some amazing stuff. But I'd say it's it's more of like the exception rather than the norm. Um, I think also there's a tendency for people to think about the Philippines as like a low labor rate country, and therefore they just only look for people who are like less than $10 an hour or something. I think if you actually bump it up and if you increase the budget and go to, I don't know, $1,500 a month,
she's still
mm,
saving a ton of money?
which is still saving a ton of money, you're going to get somebody who's like a mid-tier, midway editor, and they're going to be pretty solid, and they'll probably get most of the cultural references. But you want to ask them what TV shows they watch, they consume, like Western Netflix, like all those kind of things. And if they do, then they're going to be more close to your end consumer.
And then I think it's also being very upfront of, "Hey, here's the type of work you're gonna be doing. Are you okay with this?" Like, I had a girl where I
Yeah.
was hiring for a coordinator, and I was very this is a different job, obviously, but I was very clear with her. I was like, we wanna get you up to, like, junior strategist and strategist. Like,
Mm,
there is a growth path. You will have creative elements to your job, but you
yep.
are also the number 1 person doing admin,
Mm,
and I need you to know that off the bat, and you're welcome to get off the ride, but, like, I don't
yeah.
want you feeling bait and switched. You have grunt work because you are 21, and that is what you do at 21. And I had a person who dropped out, and I'm like, "That's fair. That's totally fair, because if I hire you and you drop out a month in after I've wasted all this time training you, that sucks for me."
Mm,
So I think it's definitely about setting expectations and making sure that people are aware, especially creatives are aware of how much creative fulfillment they are going to get out of that job.
mm. Yeah, I think, I mean, as well, just kind of thinking about the Philippines as well. Like, there's two things here. There's one is at the skill level, which can increase with experience. As you mentioned, you can start at a basic level and you can go upwards and get more experience. But as an editor, like, how much experience do you actually need as an editor to do paid social edits? Not loads. It's just mainly doing cuts, simple transitions. Sometimes it's motion graphics, but I always recommend to do that separately and get your editors to kind of like just focus on editing and footage selection. But like building those cultural references like that, you can't train. Like, you can't say to somebody, "Hey, go and watch every series of Friends from start to end and like absorb."
Well,
Go
they
and
should
watch
do
like a
that anyway because it's a phenomenal show. But yes, I
well,
agree.
of course. But you can't tell them to go and, like, I don't know, watch a TV shopping channel at 5 o'clock in the morning because you've just got home too late and you can't get to sleep, right? Whereas, like, if you live in America, you've probably consumed TV shopping for X number of hours in your life just passively, right? So you already know what direct response selling is. You have an idea of how it works. Um, and I think, like, unless all those cultural references are baked in, they just can't learn those things from scratch upwards. You can't expect to train those things in. So I'd always be asking, like, have you watched Friends from end to end? Have you watched Big Bang Theory from end to end? Like, have you watched all these like typical shows that everybody should have watched, growing up in America? How much Western TV advertising have you consumed? And I
Yeah,
think if they
those are
tick
really
those
good
boxes,
questions.
yeah, if they tick those boxes, then you can get some great ones.
And it's a really awkward conversation to talk about that because I have the utmost respect for every editor that from every country. It does not matter. It's not about the country. It's more just about the difference between the market and the person making the ads for the market. And so it's not a better or worse. It's just a fit question. And I think another element that's really I just touched my microphone, so I'm just going to say it. Another element that's like really messes with things is that there's this separation between international employees and employees in the office or in the US or in England if that's where your base is and your staff is, or wherever it is. But the problem is twofold. Number one, they're usually not staff employees. So that's already knocking you down a little bit in the like team mentality. And number two, when there's offsites, they are rarely included because their flights are expensive and inconvenient, and oh, they're not staff. So I think what happens is there's this divide where you're not having the same opportunity to bond with them. They're not coming to the US to bond with the team and experience the US. So you're not giving them these opportunities to really create those relationships, get on the same page, speak the same language, like, and experience US culture. And I think that, it's just setting them up for failure and or just not giving them all the tools that they deserve to have. And I think that like if you're saving so much money on bringing somebody on from the Philippines, you can shell out for 5K for them to come to the US on
Mm,
occasion. Like you're still saving so much money. And the benefit of that interaction in the United States is astronomical,
mm.
you
Or
know?
just send your team to the Philippines. The beaches are amazing.
Well, that's the other thing is that I do think that, like, so for example, at Hexclad, and we were expanding into Europe, I was just like, well, I don't know what German food habits, cooking habits, eating habits, cultural habits surrounding food, shopping habits, learning that, people don't buy stuff online the same way they do in the US. It's very hard to sell to people you don't understand. And I think that a lot of companies, American companies, when they try to break into Europe, I find it almost very disrespectful thinking that Americans can tell Europeans what to do. And Europeans are going to be like, awesome. I love being told what to
Yeah,
do by a loud, obnoxious American. Like,
it's so
no,
true.
you need people on the ground, at least as like giving you a cultural Bible. Like, if I'm going to break into
Mm,
France, I want a French strategist or French somebody in marketing to build me a Bible on what it is to be French what it is to be French and then what it is to be French in this category of product.
totally agree. And I think it comes back to again matching visuals and copy and things like that. I remember we worked with a brand in Norway, and we did a decent job for them, but in the end, it became quite difficult because we didn't have any Norwegian video editors. Quite hard to find, right? And so we were always just quite missing the ads that we did in English were fine, of course. But what we found in Norway is Norwegian language ads actually performed pretty well, but we're always just missing the mark. And the client would always tell us because they spoke Norwegian, hey, something's not quite right with this ad. Like you need to change this frame. And they kept giving us like micro feedback. And in the end, we were like, this doesn't work because we just don't have a Norwegian editor who understands that tiny
No.
feedback. And it's sometimes just like abbreviation of words. Like in English, when you say I'll versus I will has much more intent behind it than I'll. But the thing is, somebody who doesn't speak in native English won't get that difference.
Mm. The
You
other
know?
thing I think that's really interesting, and again, going back to Hexclad, was kitchens look different.
Mm,
Not only just the food looks different. So when we're doing a carnivore video, the style of steak that we're making in the US or, beef-based meals is not the same as the one in another country. So you're giving them food that isn't familiar to them. But then also the whole point of ads is people want to be seen. They want to see themselves reflected, and it's easier for them to put themselves in the position of using the product and benefiting from the product if it's a very easy jump from mid-30s white lady with a dog sees a mid-30s white lady with a dog and I'm like, "Oh, I get that. That's me. I would go through those actions during the day too." So everybody needs to be seen and represented, and if there's any sort of spidey sense red flag that goes off in your footage or in your communication, suddenly you're suspicious because you're like, who is trying to sell me something? And then also you're like, you're asking the viewer to take that extra little subconscious step to retrofitting themselves into that scene when it doesn't relate to them or there's something off. And I think
mm.
that's asking you never in paid ads want to ask the viewer to do work. You are there to put everything out for them so their subconscious can make a split-second decision. If you're asking for them to think when they're scrolling, you've lost them.
I love
That's why
that.
you shouldn't be using that's why when you do comedy, you can't be too clever, you can't be too cute if it's metaphorical and it's not easily absorbable. That's not going to work.
Yeah, I always say this: the message has got to be simple. You've got to have one message. Don't go for don't go for two main messages. Go for one message and make it really simple. Like any idiot who's watching anything should be able to understand it without having to think too much. I think what I'm taking away from you said is, I'm going to mention this to the team: sell to people's subconscious. Don't sell to people's conscious. That's interesting. So how do you sell to somebody's subconscious? Like, where does it start? Obviously, emotional selling is like where you get to somebody's subconscious, right?
Yeah, it goes emotional, and then they follow it up with the conscious logic. So I think your subconscious.
How do you emotionally sell a frying pan?
There's a bunch of different ways. How do you emotionally sell a frying pan? Oof. I mean, it depends on the persona. I would say that, let's say one of them would be the person who takes great pride in the way their food looks and tastes, and presenting it to others. And like for example, my husband, I'm like, just throw it in a bowl. And he's like, no. Or actually, no, when he makes cocktails and he has to have the garnish. And I'm like, I'm fine without the garnish. He's like, no, garnish. And he's not going to take creative satisfaction out of it unless it's, done properly and Instagrammable and stuff like that. So I think that maybe there's an emotion there of, I'm going to feel superior or good about myself, or braggy, or supremely competent. And I'm going to get likes and compliments because of my beautiful food. So there's,
What? We're all monkeys end of the day, right? So I always try and imagine everybody's a monkey in the jungle, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? We're basically just trying to posture up to each other so that we can be top monkey.
Yeah.
So that we don't run out of food, because if I'm perceived as the top monkey, I'm going to get all the favors from everybody, right? And I just always try and think about the chimp brain inside of every human being. And you've probably heard of Life Force 8, right? So I always try and go back to Life Force 8. Okay, which one of these particular things that makes a human tick am I actually hitting in the ads? And I think what you've said there is keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's the typical thing. And we all like to say we don't do it, but the truth is, it's built into us. It naturally happens. It just instinctively happens because we're all monkeys. We're all trying to posture. We're all trying to be the biggest monkey in the crowd so that we can basically secure our food source for the rest of our life. That's basically what it is, right? And that's why we do it.
Our food source and our biological passing down of our genes, which is why every ad is also about sex appeal.
Exactly. So you just covered those two main things, right? Getting a mate and getting food, and that's it. What else do you need? Shelter. Okay, that's easy. Everybody in the US has got shelter, so most people have got shelter. So you don't need to really focus on that. Well, true. I don't see many homeless people buying stuff off paid social and getting it delivered.
That's true. That's not usually a heavy demo.
It's not a heavy. Maybe we could. No, don't give me an idea now. Maybe we could have a delivery spot where they pick up their Amazon orders. I don't know.
I don't know where this is going, and I don't like it.
Yeah, where were we? I feel like we always go down a rabbit hole. When we last spoke, we went down about 7 rabbit holes.
You can't put two ADHD machine guns in the same room.
Yeah. This is one thing. So type A's and type B's, we talked about this last time. And for anybody who didn't see the trend, right? So type A's are hyper organized, their calendar's in order, they have a perfect to-do list. Type B's are a bit chaotic, crazy, creative, create new things, usually come up with ideas. And I feel both have their pros and cons, and neither is better or worse than the other. When I describe type A, it might sound better than type B, because type B sounds a bit unpredictable. But I think that the perfect balance in any team is, pairing up those type A's and type B's. So talk me through Hexclad. When you made those first hires, did you hire type A's or did you hire type B's? Where did you go? What was your thinking?
I didn't think of it like that, but I did think of it like skill sets. So I see the team as a pie. And when I do a lot of advising of companies of how to set up your department and how to hire. And what I always say is, when you're first building your department, find the talent. Every strategist is going to have multiple areas of being a creative strategist, hats of a creative strategist that they have stronger experience in. So production, writing, content creation, research, whatever it is. People have different backgrounds. So if basically, I say, like, your first hire, find the best person. They don't need to have everything, but mark down what they have. And then every successive hire after that should fill in the pie. So, for example, I don't love doing production. I talk about it all the time. I do it all the time. I have a background in it. It's not my favorite thing. First hire I had was a content creator and an actress and has a background in it and shoots her own stuff and loves that and naturally gets it. I was like, great, awesome. And she's hyper organized. I'm not hyper organized. So I made sure to fill in the gaps in my skill set as I brought more people on the team. So that's why, like, with my second hire, she was actually an actress. Like, my first hire has had some acting experience, but she's not actively currently acting. This woman, Paige, is an actress, a comedic actress primarily, and creates her own hilarious content, writes it, stars in it, shoots it, edits it, the whole shebang. So bringing her on where she really shined was not only content creation and making us some really fucking funny videos, but more importantly, I put her in charge of research because she owned it, because everybody has to have an area of ownership, because, like, we're all humans and that's really important to your psyche and your motivation. And her area was that, because she does this deep persona research and becomes the persona because she's an actress and she has that skill set, muscle memory of how to become somebody else. So she does a way better job of becoming male in his 50s than other people could do, because that's her bread and butter. So that's an example of kind of rounding out the team, the organized person, the crazy creative who's also, great at content production, but then also can really do your research. Like, just, fill it out.
Makes sense. I've had a visualization in my head as you were speaking. I'm just going to articulate it. You know the Joker from Batman, Heath Ledger, when he was alive? I remember like hearing the story about how he locked himself in the hotel room and just like got himself into that headspace of being the Joker for like a number of days before actually starting to film. And I think that kind of came to my head as you were describing, your creative strategist who's an actress. You really have to get yourself in the headspace of the person. And for me personally, if I can't do it, because I can't imagine being a 42-year-old menopausal woman from Wisconsin. I just can't imagine
they
it.
are not menopausal at 42, sir.
47, perimenopausal. We sell menopausal supplements.
Okay, I'll allow
perimenopausal.
It.
We'll go with that. So I can't see how little I know about the target demographic.
Exactly.
So I can't get myself in that mind space, even if I try. Even if I try and be as creative as I possibly can, lock myself in a dark room, try and imagine it. It doesn't happen. So like the way you have to do it is speak to them, right? So like I like to just jump on a call, ideally with somebody who's already taking the product, using the product, or maybe somebody who's suffering from similar pain points to what you're selling, and just speak to them like human beings. Just ask them about their life. What do they do? Do they have a dog? Do they have a family? Like, how often do they see their parents? Like, just ask them all the life questions and like just be inquisitive. I think if you're naturally inquisitive, it makes you good at sales. And like, what are we doing in direct response? We're selling, right? So I think you have to just, it comes back to what it says in the book, how to win friends and influence people. The number one principle of the book is, the TLDR of the book is, just be naturally inquisitive and give a shit about what the other person is saying. It's not about you, it's about them. Go into every situation just imagining that you're not that important and you just want to learn something from the other person. And I think for me, going into those kind of conversations with that mindset has really helped me to understand the psyche of my consumer. And clearly I haven't spoken to enough 42-year-old females from Wisconsin but yeah, I think that definitely helps. So what we encourage our creative strategists to do is jump on video calls with people and just interview them. Literally just say, hey, we want to ask you some questions. Sometimes it'll be a content creator because our content creator is within the demographic of who we're trying to sell to anyway. And usually they're easier to get hold of. Sometimes it'll be the customer. They're a little bit more difficult to get hold of. Sometimes we just jump on Reddit, and like we'll message people on Reddit and see if they'll jump on a call. So yeah, I think like really, really, really understanding that audience is the most important thing. And you just got to listen. You got to listen and genuinely give a shit about what they're saying. And then once you do that, take notes and write. You'll get all your angles.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to ask them, what would you do in this situation?
Yeah.
Like, you go to Costco and the brand you wanted to buy that you always buy is sold out. What do you do in that scenario? Are you just going to leave? Or are you going to go and search for a brand that is in stock that you feel like is good enough or maybe better? Like, put them in these situations of, you have to choose in the morning. Do I make a healthy breakfast for my family, or do I give them a bar because I don't have time? Just trying to really understand the decisions they have to make during the day and what emotions and motivations drive them to make those decisions.
Totally. So for me, like the best creative strategist is somebody who's a super empath, somebody who's like deeply empathetic because of whatever condition that's happened in their life has led them to the point of being like
Oh my
super
God, the best
empathetic.
ones have trauma. That's why we're good.
I was trying to say it without saying it, but yeah, basically,
No, it can
like
be
I think
lowercase t trauma, but that's how you
yeah.
make a good comedian too. And comedians make amazing strategists. So it all comes back around.
Right. So people who've started from trauma have got a deep, super empathy and can understand people. I mean, that's number one. Two, people who actually genuinely give a shit about connecting with people and want to know stuff about other people's lives, not for the sake of their own purpose, but just to like broaden their horizons and understand stuff about the world. Usually people who've traveled and like do random, diverse, creative things like knitting or like whatever, like, just people who do, weird, strange hobbies that you wouldn't really expect somebody of that looks like that and dresses like that to do. I think they're naturally inquisitive. You look out for signs of those things, right? You ask them questions about the different experiences. And then just somebody who's like I said, can leave their ego at the door. They're just happy to just test things and go with it. I think those are like the three kind of main mantras of what I'm looking for. In terms of the core skill sets, you mentioned stuff around production, post-production, copywriting, everything like that. I think those things, those practical hand skills, I'd call them, come secondary because I feel like you can learn those. The brain, you can't teach somebody really.
Sure.
So I think the mindset's got to be correct first, and then all those skills around everything else can be taught. And if somebody comes in as a strategist but doesn't have editing experience, like you're definitely going to be like behind a little bit, but you can work with an editor who can teach you like, okay, what's possible and what's not possible,
You don't need to have every skill for sure, but you do need it also depends on where you are in your company. So for example, as a one-woman show, I could not hire somebody who wasn't already fully baked. I don't have the ability to train you. If you get to a point where you do have some free time, then I would love to train people who have all the potential, all the skills you need, like all the baseline for what you need, and you just need to up level some skills. That's great. It really depends on what the context is. And I think the big thing what I've discovered, because like honest to God, I think everybody should leave their job and consult every few years if you're in-house, because you're at an agency, fine. But if you're in-house, you get tunnel vision and you start to just be an echo chamber of how your one place does it. Going and consulting this whole summer has been incredible and so eye-opening because I'm seeing what's happening behind all these closed doors of all these companies and all these agencies, and speaking to so many people. And one of the things I'm really realizing is you have to have the fire in your eyes. You have to have competitiveness. So people who come from like team sports, amazing. Even if you come from an individual sport, I do think there's a bit more ego in that you have to like untangle. But like, I do think team sports are great, but I have to see the fire to win. You have to be somebody who is not only competitive with others, but like really more competitive with yourself, because competitive with others will make you not a great member. And that's where ego comes in. And that's where you don't necessarily help a fellow strategist because it's my ad versus yours. That's not good. But drive to do better than last time, but then also that like excitement in your eyes when you have a new idea and you've unlocked data, insight, idea that uses all of that. I finally found the idea that I can use based on my data and insights. You got to get off on that, man. Like if that doesn't like truly excite you and like give you energy, if that's not coffee to you, then you're not in the.
How do you test for that? Because I always struggle. I've done like 1,000+ interviews. I don't know, thousands of interviews in my life, right? And I still feel like I absolutely suck at interviewing, right? I don't know if I'm just like too blinkered in interviews and I always see the best in people, so I don't know what it is, right? Like I just can't get it right consistently. And like, how do you actually look for that mindset in somebody when you're either interviewing them or testing them? Like, what do you think?
It's a conversation about like, I just try to see if there's excitement in their eyes. And like some people interview poorly in the sense of like some people interview without a lot of energy. I try not to judge that because everybody has their own personality, but I have to see passion. I have to see something in there. I have to ask a question to get to like what drives you. And if they're not saying, I get off on finding the solution to the problem, if these are not people who like puzzles, like maybe that's something to even ask of sort of like, do you like logic puzzles? Do you like, do you play Wordle? Like stuff like that, where is there some sort of competitive thing that you do? Because like I was working with one strategist and they're doing pretty good work, but as we're talking, I'm getting really excited because I'm like, oh, we can build off that for your thing, and we can build off that for your thing. And they were just dead in the eyes. And I was like, listen, I'm overexcited about this, and I have the ability to get people on the other side of the screen to get excited about that because it's infectious and you have no choice. If I'm not getting you excited about this and you can't generate that, you're never going to get excited. And that's not like a thing about I'm so great, but it's like if
Yeah.
you're talking to somebody with a lot of energy and passion and you're just, I don't know how to motivate you.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I agree that sometimes like introverted people don't always interview that well, and sometimes the dynamic, just of how they talk, can maybe downplay them. And I also try to look past that now and not look for people who are the same as me. Look for people who are kind of ideally the opposite, really. But I think that, yeah, like you said, that excitement in the eyes, people have got to be passionate about building stuff. And I think if they don't want to build stuff, then it's never going to work, because you're always going to be. I find a lot of people come to an interview just putting on their best game face just to get a job. And once they're in, they're like, oh, I can breathe now, and just sit here and just wait for instructions. Like, I think that's always like for me, like a switch off, where like if somebody does that. And I think for me also, like when somebody first starts in a role, they're being tested for the first like month, 2 months, 3 months until they're fully integrated, And I'm always, the way I used to think about it is, okay, I've interviewed somebody, I've hired somebody, okay, now I'm going to move on, right, next job. Now I look at it as like, okay, well, the interview and giving the job offer is the first step. The interview continues. It continues for the next 3 months. I've got to see, like, are you really passionate about this? Are you driving through change in the company? Are you being proactive? And I don't expect everybody to be like the most competent person in the world when they first start. That's fine. I don't expect that. But I want to see that you're asking the right questions. You're interested in what we're doing, all the new tools we're testing, all those different things, right? Like, I think that if those things are not there early days, that's a red flag for me. And then, want to investigate further as to see like what's going on. Because
yeah,
you build a culture and you want to protect it. And after a while, like if people are not matching that culture, it's just going to go downwards. And when the average keeps increasing, it actually gets harder to maintain that culture. At the beginning, we literally accepted any human being who'd work for us because it was hard. We started with like 3 people, so it was really difficult to convince. But after a while, you want to really protect that as best as you can. And it sounds like you've got the same mindset there about hiring people who've got that builder mentality, let's say.
Yeah, they just have that excitement because it's an exhausting job and it's a marathon full of sprints, and you gotta be willing to get in the trenches, but you also have to be a collaborator. And I think that I've worked on teams where you'll stay late to help somebody, but then when you ask them for help, they're nowhere to be seen. And that's a motivation killer. Like everybody needs to be willing to help another person, because creativity in a vacuum is always going to be subpar to creativity and collaboration.
Yeah, I always say I'm stealing this quote from somewhere else, and I'll definitely misquote it. But I think an idea in your own head is less valuable than your idea in somebody else's head. So I think that if I explain, there's a better wording for it, I'm sure, and somebody else made it up. I didn't.
Decent. I'm okay with that.
But we'll go with it. But if I basically articulate my idea to you, you're able to then ask me the questions to qualify the idea and try and really understand it. And at the point that you get it and you're like, oh, it clicks now, right? That's when the idea is formed in my mind. It's not when it's inside my own head. So every time I have like a new urge, and I have ideas like 17 times a day, right? Just the way that I am. If I'm really passionate about an idea, I will literally grab somebody, take them for a coffee or a little walk outside the office. And I'd be like, yo, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Is it a good idea, bad idea? Because usually when I have an idea in my head, it's gone to the top of my priority list, and all of a sudden I think it's like the top 1% thing I should be working on. And I know that it isn't, because like it happens to me so many times in the day. I'm like, no.
The CEO effect. They go on LinkedIn, they see something there like, oh, and then they send the LinkedIn to their team and like, you must do this now. And it's like, we're working on this sale this weekend. And it's like, no, this is priority.
Do you know what? I'm so guilty. I'll hold up my hands. I discovered Nano Banana, Google's new AI thing, a couple of days ago. And I was like, literally sat down with 2 people in the team immediately within like minutes. And I was like, guys, we need to use this straight away. And to be fair, they did actually start using it, and we've tested some things. But it's definitely that like you've got to really try hard to prioritize where your idea sits in the ranking of things. And for me, like when I get the energy behind an idea, I can't help but get excited. And so it's always gone to the top. And I have a recency bias. So basically, whatever the most recent thing is, I'm like, oh, this is the most important thing because it's the most recent thing. But the truth is, it doesn't work like that. And your algorithm on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on X will send you in all kinds of spirals of recency bias, right? And you want to just breathe. I think the way that I do that is like I literally go and talk to somebody, and I have a few people in the company who are like, bring me down.
Yeah.
Yep. sounding boards, and they're much more I don't know what the word
Level-headed.
is, like level-headed, grounded. They're like, people who I
Yeah.
trust their opinion of,
Practical.
and
Yeah.
practical, and they hear my ideas and like, dude, okay, you talked about this idea, but then you've got all these other things you're working on. I think this one's probably higher priority. Like, have you thought about this? So I'm often just soundboarding things like that off people.
Yeah. And what I like to do is like quarterly plans where you budget, you budget, you have like pillars you're trying to go after. Like this quarter, I want to hit this persona, I want to hit this angle, we want to test into this, we have this sale. So like we have 500 ads for the quarter. I need 100 to do this, 100 to do that, 100 to do that. Then I have 100 that are sandbox, right? So that's for scaling and iterating on stuff that's already happening, but that's also for those random ideas that come to you in the moment. Maybe they're trend based and you really do need to hop on them right now. Or maybe they're just a really fucking good idea that you need to you need to evaluate and see whether it really is as good an idea as you think it is. But then also so much of the joy of this job is that excitement of that new idea, and you don't wanna wait till it gets stale. You want the momentum of while it's marinating in your
Yeah,
head, and you gotta build that because creatives also need that. If we're doing iteration after iteration and we've seen the same footage for forever, there has to be something spicy on the side that really gets them excited if you want the longevity and you don't
yeah,
want the creativity to burn out in their brain. Because I do
totally,
think
totally agree.
especially with AI right now, I feel like
Mm,
all the fun is getting sucked out of the job. And I think what
mm,
people don't realize is that you have to keep some of that fun because we are not robots. You've hired creatives. And if you want creatives to be good at their jobs, it can't just all be handed to them. They have to do their own thinking. They have to do their own ideating. They have to like have fun. And if you've
yeah,
turned to either a factory line or you've told them to just basically do only the ideas that AI churns out, you're not going to get good work. You're also people will leave. Like that's not fun.
yeah. I think this is one of the brilliant points of our industry, right? So when you look at typical marketing departments in bigger companies, right, things move very slowly in seasons, right? Usually there's a calendar, it's set
Yeah.
up for the whole year. A budget is set in January for like the whole 12 months. I'm like, I can't get my head around that. When I work with a brand or I hear from a brand that, hey, we're doing our marketing calendar for the year. Can you tell us what your budget's going to be for like August? I'm like, dude, we're like scaling accounts in January. I haven't got a clue what's going to happen in August. Maybe we can look back at last year and project, but it's going to be a random figure. I love the fact that within creative strategy and paid social, you can literally have an idea and test it bang next week, this week, as fast as you can produce it, basically. And I think you're completely right. There needs to be flexibility in the budget to allow people to do that at any given moment in time. Because that's where you get the best ideas, things that do come off the cuff and you're like, you know what, I need to test this based on some insight, and not to hold that back from people. And I think I like the idea of, well, as a company gets bigger, naturally, decision making becomes slower. So I like the idea of having, when you have a bigger company, from what I've observed from all the different people I've spoken to, you need to kind of like have smaller teams that take care of, you don't want big teams that take care of everything. You want small teams that take care of a few things. And the way I've seen it work really well, and I don't know how you had a Hexclad, but is to have like teams that take care of a product or a product line, and they're responsible for the P&L of that product line, and they can make decisions and they have a budget specifically for that product. I don't know if you think that that's the best setup, or if you had a different one where it was kind of a bit more like how was it set up at Hexclad?
We didn't have the staff to be able to start doing that. It was on my list. Like we were going to expand at one point, and that was my plan of sort of how do I put you guys in buckets without stifling you? Because the worst thing you can do to a creative strategist, like I said, is put them on a factory line. So like I've seen places where they'll have pods and like this pod does UGC and this pod does static and this pod does explainers. And like you're gonna fry, people are gonna start drinking on the job. Like they're gonna be so bored. Um, and so you want to give them an area of ownership and focus them, but you can't make it too narrow or there's no creative diversity in their day. Um, so that is really challenging. I do think product is a good way to divvy it up. I think region also is a good way to divvy it up. I think it really depends on your product and your brand. Do you have 5,000 SKUs? Do you have two main SKUs? But I really, really like, I think all strategists should be doing statics and video. I don't like it when I see places that those have been separated. You need to understand how to do both to be a well-rounded strategist. And more importantly, there are learnings back and forth that if you're not in the edit and manipulating both types of content, you're not going to understand how a static could make a good video, how a video could turn into a static. Like, you're not going to gain graphic ideas from the static that you can incorporate into a video. You've cut yourself off. And so I do think that like everyone on the team does need to be able to do everything, but then does that mean that that's their focus every day? No, but they still have to know how to do it.
Totally, yeah. Often we'll get like hooks where, I mean, I like to think about hooks in the same way as I think as a graphic design where I've got visual hierarchy. You know, there's a headline, there's a subheadline, there's an order in which your eye looks at things. And I'm always I'm using the same kind of terminology, nomenclature, let's say, of how I describe a graphic design, an image, versus how I describe a hook. I'm like, okay, where does your eye go first? Pause. This is a static, right? Where does it go? Does it go to the headline? Does it go to the caption? Should the headline be bigger? Should it be smaller? Should the headline come in first? Should the caption come in second? Like, I'm always
Yeah.
asking these questions from strategists and getting them to like keep playing that first 3 seconds again and again. And like, it's a moving version of a static, in my opinion. That's how I look at it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like there are some little things that seem like I'm being nitpicky, but what I'm trying to teach my team is to look for those little things. I don't want to be the one telling you, but I want it to be innately in you so that after a few times I give you this note, you just do it. And that stuff like, do you do all caps? Do you do a mix of it? Do you say stop in all caps? Do you use an emoji? Do you use a freaking M dash? Because I have a whole thing. The reason why AI is obsessed with M dashes is because they're incredibly important for separating information and thoughts, and they visually do it for you. And it makes the brain be able to absorb a multi-point sentence. Like you're talking about how like your headline has to be 1 point. You know, when you can do that differently, when you have an M dash and the brain separates the points. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I totally agree with you. And I think there are these little elements of, do you change the color of that? Do you make that bigger? Where people are just sort of like, Joe, you're being micromanaging. And I'm like, listen, I know I have that tendency. I'm working on it, whatever. But like, sometimes there's a real legitimate reason. And I do think it's going to affect performance. So I try to minimize my micromanagement to the beginning of the video and then just be like, shut up, Joe. Just let go. But yeah, it's really that first
Yeah.
like 5 to 10 seconds, like don't fuck around, man.
I think, I mean, you leaned on a good point there, which is micromanagement. Like, giving detailed feedback should never be perceived as micromanagement, but I think that often it is. And I think that there's so much brilliance in the detail that gets missed out because people are afraid that it comes across like micromanagement. And I think you've really got to find team members who are receptive to it and don't perceive it as micromanagement. And if they do, because they've been previously conditioned by previous employers that is micromanagement, then you've got to say, hey, we work differently. I'm going to give you such detailed feedback that you're going to hate me for the first few weeks. Then once they get conditioned into receiving that level of feedback, they understand, hey, this is how it's done here. I need to go
And
into the
that's
brilliance of the
speaking
detail.
Joanna. We come all the way
There
back
you go.
around. What is speaking Joanna? And speaking Joanna is, I know she's going to want this capitalized. I know she's going to want an emoji here. I already sense it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of it. Yeah, I do think that the devil's in the details. And that's why also I am so, listen, ugly ads are great. They have a time and place. And I think that if you're trying to do ugly, great. Mistakes are good. If you're not trying to do ugly, don't use ugly principles for your elevated, buttoned up, fancy ad. So your margins need to be perfect. I'm sorry, they do. And I get very frustrated when people get sloppy about stuff like that because I don't want to be that bitch who's coming in and measuring margins. Do not make me do that. If you're a graphic designer and you don't have eyes on your margins, you're not a good graphic designer. And so you're thinking I'm being micromanaging when really you're just not doing, oh man, I'm so sorry if that was me. You think I'm a micromanager, but really you're just not doing your job properly. And I'm holding you accountable. So if I'm selling you, for example, Hexclad, and I say this all the time, so I'm sure like you could cut together a mashup of every time I said this. But if I'm selling $1,000 cookware set and my ad is messy, I don't know how you're going to trust me that my product isn't a mess. And I understand those are different departments and different people and all of that. But to me, the consumer who doesn't understand that, there is a persona, which is me, and there are multiple of me in this world who judge you and write you off because they're like, there's a typo, you're sloppy, I no longer trust you. You're telling me that you're a luxury brand, but your ad is not screaming luxury. So like, I feel bait and switch.
I totally agree with that. Totally agree. I think it's about like, I think often when you're trying to build an exceptional company, right, you have to have exceptional people. And there are people who maybe are exceptional, but have worked in average companies or worked for an average manager. And so like they've been conditioned through bad management, through their history of their career. And when they come to you and you're like, hey, I want this, they might perceive it as a micromanagement because they've had an average manager from an average company. So that for me is like a big thing. And I'm glad you've said all this stuff because it validates what I've already been feeling for a long time.
Because you're up-leveling people. You're not just being a dick.
Exactly. But label it, like I feel like unless you label it and say, hey, I'm not being a dick. This is what I'm doing. I'm literally up-leveling you. This is what you need to actually operate at this level because this is what this company is about. I keep trying to tell people, hey, we're trying to build a top 1% team. If you're not top 1%, you don't want to be top 1%, leave. That's it. And if people leave, they leave. And I think that you've got to have that mindset to build an exceptional company. And I think like naturally, if people leave and it is what it is.
And I think that the best employee and what I suss out when I'm hiring, going back to that conversation, is, are you the kind of employee I'm going to have to tell to take a day off, to stop trying so hard, to stop caring so much? Or are you the type of employee that I'm going to try to have to beg you to care and to stay late and to have ownership and what is the word? Like creative, I don't know, whatever, standards for yourself, a high bar. And obviously the ones who you have to tell to like calm down are the best employees. The thing is though, that then my job becomes, how do I take care of you and make sure you don't burn out? Because that's the biggest holding you're going to have to do. And
Yeah.
that's what all of my managers have had to do. You can ask any of my managers and they're like, the biggest thing with Joe is to tell her to like, it's okay. You can do less. Please go home. Please don't answer Slack. And it's something I work on and I'm not great at. And it's something that I ask my direct reports to also keep me honest. It's a manage up and a manage down. So if you see me being unhealthy, feel free to be like, Joe, just stop, like, or Joe, like, I need you to leave, within a respectful way. But I think that like burnout is a huge problem in this industry. And so regardless of if you do, that is a better employee, but at the same time, you do have a serious responsibility as that person's manager. If they're brilliant, you need them to be brilliant all year. And they can't do that sustainably at 110% all year. So for example, like if Q4 is a big deal for your company, like if you're selling gum, no one's gifting gum in Q4. If you have a giftable Q4 product, nobody on my team takes vacation in Q4. You can take a day, here or there, but like we are in the trenches together and like we are fighting until the end here. However, the day we knock off, you better go and like disassociate on the couch, go on vacation, do something. I don't want to hear from you for the rest of like Christmas to New Year's because you need to reset. And if you don't, you're not coming back fresh in January. The other thing is that I started implementing this thing of like every quarter, you have to at least take a long weekend. I need you to take like a 4-day weekend every quarter because those kind of employees, some of them feel guilty. And some of them just doesn't even occur to them. Like I'll have a problem where I'm just like, oh my God, it's already been 3 months. I totally forgot to like schedule time off for myself. And so to keep people honest, because they may not realize they're getting into a bad place until it's too late. And as somebody who's burnt out before, I think the best thing you can do as a manager is figure out what type of worker do I have on my hands here? How do I keep them healthy and valuable, not only for the bottom line of my company, but for their well-being, which affects the bottom line of my company. So even if you don't have empathy and you just think about money, keeping your team healthy equals money.
It's like a long-term gain, isn't it? Right? If you in the short term you can push people and get a lot out of them, but then if they're going to disappear, all that best practice, knowledge, training, investment that you put into them is going to disappear. So like checking in with people is important,
And
both
that's
for
also
them and us.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, saying it's important for the P&L and also for people, how they feel about their work.
Yeah. And I've had people follow me from job to job and are okay being managed by me again. And like, that's like the nicest thing. That's like as nice as my husband proposing to me. Like that, like I hold that in my heart so dearly. But I think it's like, there are crunch times and there are not crunch times. And you have to really take advantage of both. So I'm going to work you really hard in Q4, but then hopefully you'll get a bonus. Basically, if you want your team to work hard in Q4, team mentality, um, don't take a ton of vacation, but then reward them at the end with a bonus and a very serious vacation, not an on-call, not a check-in, shut your brain off, you don't have a job, you forgot what your name is. And then also, sale times, general sales throughout the year get like that, and they're really rough. If you have a big budget, sales are a lot of work. They're not just 3 ads you're throwing up there. They're a lot of work. And when we're in an evergreen period, I want you to go to yoga at 5. Like, I want you to take a break because in a few weeks, I'm going to ask you to hustle your ass off. And I need to balance that.
Makes total sense. I've had so many takeaways from today's episode. I want to round off just by.
Me too.
I'm going to go back and take notes and just implement some things into the team. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, what is the most exciting thing for you in 2025? And I think you mentioned about feeling some anxiety around AI and things like that. So talk to me a bit about that and tell me what you're excited about.
So when it comes to AI, what I am really excited about, it's honestly not static or video generation. For somebody who is not naturally as organized in my thinking. So it's all up here, but it's a swirling, chaotic mess. And so, especially as somebody who has gone into consulting for the first time in my life, I don't know how I could have consulted before AI, because having that organizational partner, essentially, it's like I hired a virtual assistant who is an organized brain and can keep me honest and keep my anxiety down. Because when you don't have organization in your thoughts, at least in me, it causes anxiety because it's all swirling and I'm trying to capture it.
Nice.
So that's where AI has just really excited me. It's given me such a peace of mind, and it's reduced my anxiety because I have that organized friend where I'm like, blah, 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 put this in bullet points. And it's like, and it's your brain a lot of the time. It's not like I'm relying on it to tell me what to do. It's really a lot of help me put my brain in a way that I can explain it to clients, in a way that I can teach people, in a way that I can go to sleep and stop worrying if I forgot a point that I need to make. That's been really exciting for me.
That makes total sense. I can resonate with that massively. And I think it helps you to fill in the gaps between your thinking to articulate to a human being rather than just living inside your own brain. So that makes total sense. Joanna, it's been a pleasure. I wish it could come well for you because it sounds amazing what you've been building. And
for you, man, this sounds fun.
Let's work for each other. There you go.
Perfect. Let's take over the world. Yeah.
Let's do it. And I'm going to send you the Joanna song by French Montana because I know that you haven't heard it yet. So
I'm really, really excited about that. I need to do a mashup of all the Joanna songs. So it's like Kool and the Gang, French Montana, and then Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. Cool. Joanna, where can people find you online? Where do you hang out?
Yeah, I am mostly on LinkedIn, like a cool older millennial. So it's Joanna Wallace, parentheses Sloan, because I changed my name. And I'm on Twitter. It's JoeWall202. I'm not as active on there, so you can really find me on the LinkedIn. And also on YouTube, I've been doing a YouTube series. We just started a partnership with Recharm, which is an footage asset management platform that we used at Hexclad, and I'm in love with them. They're like the greatest people. I love them so much. And so, they came to me to do a series on creative strategy, deep dives and advice and stuff like that. So our first episode just came out, and I'm just really excited to share knowledge and hope that people don't make all those mistakes I made so that I can just make them for you and you are perfect.
Amazing. I'm definitely going to be checking out that series. I checked out Recharm a couple of years ago, and I'm very keen to check it out again because I know it's a pretty cool tool. But
they're also
Joanna,
just really good people.
Yeah, and I remember getting on pretty well with the CEO. He seemed like an interesting guy. Yeah, but Joanna, been a pleasure to have you on. I'm gonna dial off now, and appreciate you. Thank you. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, have a good one.
Take care.